Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, the Corvette is still on the lift, and from our last update, we haven't really made a lot of progress, but what we have done is buy a bunch of new parts. You guys might be wondering, well, what are we doing this time? Well, as you guys saw, in the last video, almost like the last 2 or 3 videos, depending on how many we've edited, basically we've been fighting fuel pressure drop issues, and after fighting with that fuel system that was on the car for the last 5 or 6 weeks, finally just gave up on it. Long story short, between the fittings, the fuel pressure stuff, the alternator, that was the other thing, the electrical system we fixed last video, I've just decided to start over. And some of you guys might be wondering, like, well, aren't you wasting a lot of money? Well, I am a bit, but I think I could sell these parts for, to help recover some of my money back. Or I'll just hang on to them, and you never know, some other project might come up and I'll be able to use some of these parts in the future. So what have we replaced? We are starting completely over from scratch and getting rid of the ECS style single pump external fuel pump setup. What we're moving over to is an A&A twin pump, be an external pump as well, but I'll show you what we got, guys. This is the gist of what comes in the A&A external fuel pump set. Now, all of these fittings and lines are pre-made. That may have been part of my problem, is that, I pre-made those lines. They're all PTFE, and maybe some of them just didn't seal right. So after running into those issues, I didn't want to run into that problem again. So I looked at the A&A kit. Everything's pre-made. The only thing I may have to do is get some fittings and adapters. But, I don't have to create any more line. Everything's going to be here. So here's the feed line. Here's the other thing. This is a -10 feed line coming out of the tank. So this fitting right here will be coming out of the tank, coming into this pre-made crimped professional line, going into I believe it's a fuel filter. Yeah, that's a filter. Then this will go into our twin Holley fuel pump. This fuel pump is rated for 1,200 horsepower on ethanol. So, it'll take ethanol, actually I think it's almost anything. Pump gas, alcohol, ethanol, whatever. Supply line, this is gonna be a -8 going from the pump, so coming out of here, going into here, coming into this setup. This fitting right here where my finger is, that will go onto the fuel line coming off the firewall, and then this fuel line over here will go into the fuel rail. Now, the A&A kit actually has a fuel pressure regulator, and it has a return line. So that's the other benefit of this new fuel system. So we have a Holley Dominator return style EFI fuel line, and this is a -8, no, this is a -6, sorry. And they sell you a line, I actually don't know where it is, but they sell you a line that will connect from here, this inlet, to the threaded, basically, purge valve on the end of the fuel rail. It's where you can put a gauge. It's where you can basically, you press it in and release the pressure on the fuel rail, so there's no fuel pressure in the setup. But with the E-Force, I don't have that, so I'm gonna have to make my own lines going from the fuel rails from Edelbrock to the setup. And on the side of it, we do have a 1/8 NPT post here, and we could add a gauge to know what fuel pressure we're setting the car to. Now, the return line will come off the bottom here. As you guys can see, it says RET, so that's our return. And that will go through this hose, which I believe is a -8. Yeah, it's a -8. And this return line will go through the car and into this fitting in the back, and that will go right into your fuel tank. So this is where I'm also going to deviate from the A&A setup. I'm going to also be adding a fuel bulkhead fitting from ECS, and as you guys can see, this is a -8 and -10 inlet. So the outlet is going to be -10, and the inlet for the return is going to be -8, and it's rated for E85. And this you'll basically drill a hole in the tank. It's 1 3/4 inches, and put this bulkhead fitting in, and this will be our fuel coming out of the stock GM tank. All right, over here under the car, you guys can see I actually have completely removed the aftermarket fuel system that we had previously. The D-Works pump is gone, the lines are all gone. The T-fitting that was over there, you know, into the factory feed line, that's gone. I've plugged that all back up. Now there is still a fuel filter coming out of the tank that will have to be removed because that's where we're going to drill our tank for the ECS bulkhead fitting. And you guys will notice that we have started to install the parts from the A&A dual fuel pump setup. So as you guys can see, we've torn apart the passenger side, we've also torn apart the driver's side. You guys will also notice that I have installed the feed line from the dual fuel pump kit. Actually, I already have it installed. I've got it ran down through the chassis, through the rocker panel, and into the back. And here in the back, you guys will see that I have the line. I have some painter's tape over the edge of it just to keep it clear. And that is going through the rocker panel. That'll eventually feed the pumps, and then the pump feed will eventually go into the tank. For our custom fuel lines, you guys will actually recognize some of these parts that we used previously in our upgrades to the fuel system last year. I'll have a link in the video description above to that video. It almost makes sense to make pre-made lines. Plus, I won't have any leaks, I won't have anything. We're trying to avoid all the issues from the fuel pump setup that we had in the back. It's still in that bucket over there. And we also have the same lines that we ordered from Fregola over on the SS. You guys can't really see it, but we ordered lines for the transmission cooler so I didn't have to assemble anything on that project. And that car's been down the drag strip, been on the dyno, I've put hundreds of miles on that car and I've not had a single problem with the transmission cooler lines. And you know, this is pretty much gonna be the same setup. It's a -6 PTFE. There's two options you guys can do. You can either do a aluminum or steel fitting. Basically, we're gonna be doing only straight edges and 90s. So from the 90, it's literally gonna be in the middle of your fitting, and it's gonna be to the very edge of the line, not including the screwing part on the fitting. So pretty simple, and that'll be the length of your assembly. They do sell pre-made hoses in certain lengths. They also sell custom length hoses. So I am going to put the fuel rails back on the car. I've replaced all the end pieces with Fregola. Actually, these are Russell, just -6 ORB to -6 AN. And we'll get all our measurements. As you guys can see, we have installed the adjustable fuel pressure regulator. This is just held onto a bracket to the master cylinder, brake master cylinder, with a 15mm bolt. Just take it out, put that in, and you're good to go. Now the front, you will see this is actually that hose that I used on the old passenger side rear. So what I have done is I've moved that hose from the passenger side front, ran it under the snout, over here, and into the fuel pressure regulator. And you guys might be wondering, hey, you're not installing that the same way that A&A does. This is true. Now, see, you guys, we have these billet fuel rails from Edelbrock, and as you can see, the front and back are both going to have these -6 fittings. Ignore the back fitting, I just have not replaced that yet. So since we do not have stock fuel rails on this car, we're trying to do like the ultimate setup. And basically what the ultimate setup is, you want the feed lines to come in from the back of the rails, go through the fuel injectors, into the front of the rails, and then in the middle of the two rails, you'll have your fuel pressure regulator. Well, as you guys know, we're running the Holley Dominator fuel pressure regulator, and we obviously can't put it up front because, well, that's not where the A&A kit is designed to put it. So what we're gonna do is have the front of the rails come to the fuel pressure regulator, and the return line will go out the bottom toward the back of the car. I actually have a picture of what I'm describing here, and as you guys can see, you know, that it's basically, like I said, it's going through, the fuel is coming from a Y block to the back of the rails, through the fuel rails to the front, and in between the front of the two fuel rails, you have the fuel pressure regulator. We're gonna have that same setup, just a little bit longer hose because obviously we have the A&A setup. To finish up the fuel lines that we were showing earlier, you guys will see we actually have the lines all ordered and they're all installed. There is the line from up front, we showed you that earlier. This is the second line that we have. It's a It's a 90 fitting. It's dash 6 going from the fuel pressure regulator into the front of the Edelbrock Supercharger fuel rail. The third line is going from the passenger side rear of the rail into the Russell Y-block fitting that's right here. So for that fuel line, it just has a 90-degree fitting on the back, and it's a straight fitting coming right into the Y-block. The other half of that Y-block is going into the back of the driver's side fuel rail. You guys can't see it again because it's all covered up, but so if you guys could see, there's the Y-block. There's a 180-degree fitting coming off that fitting, going right into the back of the billet fuel rails that came with the E4 Supercharger. And how we hooked all of that into the stock fuel system was we just connected the A&A fuel line to a E85 fuel sensor. You've seen that in the previous videos, and that is going directly into the Y distribution block. As you can see, we have the ECS Bulkhead Fitting fuel fitting installed into the tank. Now, I was gonna end up filming this, but guys, this honestly took a real long time. I will give you two pieces of advice. First is you guys are going to need a 1 3/4 hole saw to drill the ring out for the first ring to go through. And this is from Lennox. I'll try to have a link in the description down below for this. And also, the other thing you're going to have to get is a 3-inch bolt that's the same pitch and thread as the bulkhead fitting. It is a standard size, so it's not metric, it's imperial. I can't remember what the thread or pitch was. Honestly, guys, just take your bulkhead fitting with you to the hardware store and you'll find it real quick. It's a common thread. So once you get the longer bolt, what you guys are going to do is actually install this in the secondary ring that goes inside the tank. That way you have a much better grip on that secondary ring, and it won't go flying in and drop in the bottom of the tank. I had to fish mine out a couple times, but luckily it just dropped within the back half of the tank. I was able to just grab it with my fingers. So, you know, get you some long hardware, and that will allow you to, you know, hold on to that. Now you're able to actually keep this kind of in the corner, and then you're able to fish the outer ring inside the tank with the sock, and then you just basically gotta, you know, fish it around and twist the inside ring until it gets that loop gets around the fuel line, you know, the feed line. So once you're able to get that, put your copper rod in through the top hole. So put it in through the dash 8 hole, and then, you know, this will feed into the inside ring, and then keep it tight. And then I was able to just hold the copper rod and kind of twist it a little bit, and then I was able to line up the bolt holes for the long screw to go back in. And once I got the one side started, I was able to get the second side lined up. I screwed that in. I tightened that one, not all the way down, but pretty far down. And then I removed the long bolt, put the second bolt in on the driver's side here, and I was able to get everything tight. So that's pretty much gonna be it for the ECS bulkhead fitting. Just like I said, make sure you go out and buy yourself a longer bolt. And the other thing is, I wanted to mention, the hole saw, it was actually a little bit undersized. So I actually ended up having to use my collection of files and rasps and stuff to actually kind of go around the hole and get it, you know, pretty much scraped off a little bit, just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. I did that probably 3 or 4 times. Finally got to where I was able to get the whole assembly in. Oh, and by the way, guys, I ended up taking this out like 3 times because I was like, oh, it'll go in. But what I failed to realize was the hole wasn't big enough. So, after filing it, making sure it fit, filing it, make sure it fit, put it in probably 3 or 4 times, and finally was able to get the hole big enough, and so that the whole fitting, you know, this whole assembly would fit inside of it. I have the top of the fuel bulkhead fitting with the return line. That's all been attached. We've got a 90 coming out of the bulkhead fitting, and then a 45 going into the A&A return line. So we have that return line coming out the heat shield over here for the gas tank going into the tunnel, and I obviously put this heat sleeve product around it, and then I have that going around the transmission and then into the torque tube. And as you guys can see, I zip tied the fuel line, the return line, to the brake hoses and fuel line hoses all the way through with the torque tube going up to the bell housing up front. Then up front here, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but the return line is coming up underneath the charge cable here and into the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator. And as I was saying, I'm obviously going to have to reroute that front line underneath the steering column like I was saying, but before we do that, we're going to actually buy another set of this. This is a heat shield product called Cool It. The company is Thermotech, and I believe this was only $14 for 3 feet. I ordered on Prime. I just ordered some more, so I should get this in a couple days, and this is good for up to 2,000 degrees. So I'll have a link for this product as well down in the description below so that you guys know where I picked this stuff up from. And as you guys can see, we do have the fuel pump fully plumbed and installed. This is that dash 10 feed line like we were saying, going to the fuel filter, coming into the pumps. We've got the wiring all hooked up. That wiring is ran through the rocker panel. And the only thing we did was we took the ground and used the old ECS fuel mounts that we had, already in the chassis, so I attached them both there. And so we've got both fuel pumps hooked up and wired. And the last part of this fuel system install is actually going to be the wiring. Now we've already run the fuel lines and the wiring for all the fuel lines into the back, going through the rocker panel and into the back. And as you guys saw earlier, we've already got both fuel pumps plugged in. Now up front, it's pretty simple. All you've got is a simple power strap. There's a fuse in here. That'll plug into the alternator. You're also going to have your wiring going to your relay. The wiring is coming from the hob switch. And on the other side of the hob switch, you're going to have a ground. We're just going to modify and extend this wire a little bit, and we'll have that ground going down to this common chassis ground right here. Alright guys, I've already kind of compiled most of this video, so I know this video is going to be really long. So, we're going to end this video right here. That is the overall install on the A&A Supercharger fuel system kit, running the lines, installing the fuel lines, installing the return line, the custom fuel lines that we had to do, and the electrical for it. Overall, pretty simple. I'd say the hardest thing I had to do was come up with the measurements for all those custom lines that we had to order. And those lines actually ended up being lines that were in stock at Summit and Jegs. I think they ended up being either 20 or 22 inches on each line, I forget. I'll have a part number and link to everything down below for the fuel lines. The fittings, I'll try to include as many as I can. Like, I already had some of these fittings. I had the Y distribution block. I had the 90s. I had some of the end cap, the dash 6 ORB to dash 6 AN. I had some of those, so try to have a list, a comprehensive list of everything that I've installed today. And really the only other fitting I had to custom order were the Russell fittings that were black for the E85 sensor and that one fitting on the firewall. I replaced the blue ones that came with the A&A kit. I mean, they were only like $6 or $7 each, so it wasn't a big ordeal. So those have all been replaced. But other than that, everything was pretty simple, and I hope this was a good overview for you guys that are going to install a A&A Supercharger fuel kit. Now, my install will vary from the A&A because the A&A uses their own supercharger. We've obviously got a root style blower, so that's all a little bit different, but this should give you enough information for you guys to complete the fuel setup and install. So we're going to wrap this up here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. And as always, if you want to help support the channel, click all the links down below. Thanks guys. Have a great one.